In Seattle, police hope a bloody handprint will finger a killer. But the stain is barely visible. Can investigators bring the evidence into focus? A new computer promises to read a killer's mind. Can it really see the truth locked in the murderer's memory? 2 bodies are found in the California wilds. Clues are spotty and scarce. To bring the killer to light, police rely on a new laser technique. When evidence can't be seen with the naked eye, investigators must use extraordinary means to find it. As technology develops to tease out clues, it's providing detectives with an infallible witness. Forensic science is constantly evolving, from the discovery of the uniqueness of the human fingerprint to the ability to match a criminal to his crime through DNA profiling. Technology continues to provide investigators with new weapons. But fingerprint and DNA evidence are discovered in only 1% of all cases. When trusted techniques fail, investigators must turn to cutting-edge technology to bring invisible clues to light. On the clear spring morning of May 14, 1995, in Kirkland, Washington, just outside Seattle, Randy Acall returned from work and noticed that his neighbor's front door was propped open.
Hello?
Ordinarily, he wouldn't have given it much thought.
Hello?
But he had noticed that the door had been open when he had left for work the night before.
Anybody home?
Randy was a little worried and decided to see if everything was all right.
Hello? Hello?
As he entered the bedroom, a gruesome sight greeted his eyes. He found the body of a woman in her 30s lying in a heap at the foot of the bed. Her head was covered in the top bed sheet, and a t-shirt was bunched up around her neck. Blood stained the carpet beneath her. Horrified, Randy dialed 911.
Yes, I'd like to report an emergency.
Detective T.J. Klump of the Kirkland Police responded to the call.
It was Mother's Day, 1995, at about 10:30 a.m. in the morning. I was preparing to take my wife and daughter out for Mother's Day when, just prior to leaving, I received a call from the Kirkland Dispatch Center, and they requested that I immediately contact Sergeant Markle and the Detective Division that there had been a suspicious death that all the detectives were being called in for to investigate.
When the police reached the apartment, they saw no sign of forced entry. At first glance, there were none of the usual indications that a crime had taken place. The TV, the stereo, and other items of value were still in the condominium. Nothing had been disturbed.
Once I arrived there, and after we had obtained the search warrant, we entered the condominium. And the first thing that struck me was how clean it was for a crime scene. It was very clean, immaculate.
The killer seemed to have been meticulous in covering his tracks. Detectives set about trying to uncover what few clues they could. The case hinged on their ability to bring secrets of the crime scene out into the light. A driver's license was found in a denim purse. The murdered woman was identified as Dawn Faring, a student at the Lutheran Bible Institute who had been living at the condominium for several months. Autopsy evidence, including the body's temperature and its state of rigor mortis, indicated that she had been killed within the last 24 hours. Further test results indicated that the victim had been sexually assaulted, but none of the culprit's DNA was found. The detective and his fellow officers carefully collected evidence from the scene, removing the bed sheets and sections of the blood-stained carpet. They hoped these might contain some clue to the killer's identity. They also found cigarette tobacco and ash near the bed. The victim didn't smoke. They were left by the killer, but were of little use. Another scrap turned up that proved more valuable.
While we were searching the condominium for evidence, we found a box of receipts. And Dawn Faring was a very meticulous person. She was very organized. She saved receipts. She had phone logs. And she had saved some receipts, one of which was a receipt from 5/12 of 95. It was during the late evening hours. She had purchased some groceries at a nearby Fred Meyer's store.
To pinpoint Faring's time of death and to determine whom she might have been with, police went to the grocery store listed on the receipt.
Roxanne, I'd like to show you this picture and see if you recognize this young lady.
A clerk remembered helping the victim. Faring had come in near closing time. She had been friendly and in a good mood, and she had left the store by herself. Along with this information and the evidence gathered from the crime scene, investigators began to piece together the victim's final hours. After leaving the store just before 10 p.m. on May 12th, she apparently went straight home and unpacked her groceries. Putting herself through Bible school, Faring kept track of every penny she spent. She placed her receipt in the box in her hall closet. She then began to bake a pan of brownies, possibly for a Mother's Day celebration the next afternoon. Police estimated it took her an hour to make the brownies. They found them cut and arranged on a plate by the stove. By retracing Faring's steps, investigators arrived at an estimated time of death. Pinning down the time of death narrowed the killer's window of opportunity. But who killed Dawn Faring? Careful scrutiny of the crime scene revealed the faint traces of what might have been finger and palm prints on the bed sheets, traces of the murderer preserved in the victim's own blood. But there was no way to dust or lift the prints from the sheet. Detectives needed to somehow make them clear enough to be useful. The evidence was passed on to King County latent laboratory scientist Pat Warwick.
When we opened up the evidence, we could tell there was some kind of body fluid on the sheet, but any discernible detail, any kind of handprint or anything was very, very difficult.
The print was smeared and faint. No one had ever tried to lift a fingerprint from cloth before, and this one promised to be particularly difficult. Warwick believed his best hope might be to process the prints with amido black, a forensic dye that highlights organic proteins such as blood. But amido black was usually used on hard, non-porous surfaces. Its use on fabric could jeopardize this crucial piece of evidence. Warwick called the FBI for help. but they could offer no advice beyond agreeing that amido black was the best approach. If Warwick used amido black on the sheet fragment, the dye and the rinses in distilled water might well destroy the print. But if the process worked, Warwick would be breaking fresh ground in forensic analysis. Warwick was extremely careful, but it seemed he was not careful enough. When he immersed the fabric in the inky solution, his worst fears were realized. The entire swatch, palm print and all, turned an opaque shade of dark purple. Any hope of getting a legible print seemed lost. In Seattle, authorities investigating the murder of Dawn Faring feared that the only forensic evidence, a palm print, was ruined. Hoping to find another lead, detectives questioned the victim's neighbors. Was this a crime of opportunity? Or was the killer someone Dawn Faring knew and trusted enough to let in her door?
About a year? About a year now, yeah.
We're out.
Yeah,
While the work of the detectives moved forward, there was a glimmer of hope in Pat Warwick's laboratory. He was relieved to see the excess dye begin to rinse away from the palm print. As he hoped, the amido black dyed the bloodstains purple. But it also stained the fabric light blue, making it difficult to discern the palm print from the weave of the fabric. The confusion of the two patterns made a clear analysis next to impossible. Warwick contacted his colleague, Eric Berg, an expert in the field of digital imaging and enhancement at the Tacoma Police Department.
Yeah, I don't know how good it's going to be, but just let me know, and we'll get down here.
Could Berg's computers and high-tech cameras read the bloody palm print and identify the killer?
Piece of sheet here. Get some amido black on it.
Up in here?
There might be something there.
Berg used a digital camera to capture the print. It gave him the flexibility he needed to manipulate and clarify the image. Once he obtained the digital images of the bloody print, he followed strict chain of evidence procedures. The images were tracked with a system that protected them from tampering or accidental alteration.
The software that we use uses the data encryption standard, which is a governmental standard that actually will allow you to mathematically prove that an image or any kind of a digital file has not been altered.
To preserve the original picture, he made copies to work from. Now he was ready to clean up the print. But the image was still in such poor condition, he was not confident he could do much. The ridges of the fingerprints seemed hopelessly tangled with the fabric weave.
Now, at this point, I would put in the source. You could just start to follow a ridge line on the print, and then all of a sudden the weave pattern would come in and disrupt your eye, and you'd go off on a tangent, and you couldn't follow that ridge without constantly being interrupted by the fabric pattern. So the biggest problem was that fabric pattern. We had to find a way to just suppress it or get rid of it somehow, and then look at the print, what was left after that. And if I move my box over here...
Berg used software to filter out the background pattern.
You can see,
while it didn't entirely remove the weave pattern, it managed to blur it, allowing the ridge detail to stand out in clearer relief. But it seemed to Berg that while every step made the image of the bloody print a little clearer, it also created new problems for him to solve. In blurring the fabric pattern, this process significantly reduced the contrast of the image. It remained to be seen whether he could make sense of the print. While Eric Berg struggled to render a clear print, the Kirkland detectives continued to question the victim's neighbors.
I was in a hurry, I had to get off.
So you left work last night about 9 o'clock?
Right, about 9 o'clock.
The names of 5 men living near the victim's condominium complex came up with prior arrest and fingerprint records. One of these men was Eric Hayden, who lived in the apartment above the victims. When Hayden drove into the condominium parking lot, the detectives were waiting to speak with him.
Well, let's wait until he brings
I looked over at the driver, who was a white male in his late 20s, and I noticed that he was smoking a cigarette, and he was looking over at us with his eyes, but yet his head remained facing straight ahead. I thought this was kind of suspicious.
Hayden strolled past the officers without acknowledging them and disappeared into his condominium.
We waited a few minutes, and we wanted to see if he would return outside, which he did. He walked back down the stairs and again walked past us, not looking over at us, and was walking directly towards his car. It was at that time I approached him and I said, "Excuse me, are you Eric Hayden?" He said, "Yes, I am." And I asked him if I could ask him a few questions about that night, to which he agreed.
Hayden claimed he'd been out drinking on the night of the murder and knew nothing about it. He had noticed nothing unusual when he came home. He puffed on a cigarette as the conversation began. To the detectives, he seemed nervous.
When you went upstairs, did you notice?
But a case of nerves would never be enough for a conviction if Hayden was the killer. The police still needed solid evidence, and pressure remained heavy on Eric Berg to provide it.
4 or 5 times.
In his lab, he fed the image of the bloody palm print through yet another computer program. This step raised the tonal values of the ridge detail, much like adjusting the contrast on a television screen. Finally, using all his software and expertise, he produced an image clear enough for comparison with the prints of any suspects. Police asked Warwick to check the prints of the 5 men with criminal records who lived near the condo complex, and that included the prints of Eric Hayden.
They gave us the name of Eric Hayden, and we checked our file, and we had some prints of his on file in our agency. So we pulled those for comparison. Well, once you're looking at the comparison and you're making the positive opinion of a match, as a lay examiner, there's that short period of time when you're the only one who knows. The detectives don't know, no one knows. And then so it gives you a real sense of accomplishment.
On May 31st, Pat Warwick called the detectives and told them he had made a positive match. The prints on the bedsheet did indeed match the prints of Eric Hayden. That same night, the Kirkland detectives went to Hayden's condominium to execute a search warrant.
Officers, open the door.
Eric Hayden, we have a warrant for your arrest. Lay down, face down on the deck.
Going for it.
Hayden was handcuffed and arrested.
What's going on?
His apartment was searched top to bottom, and his girlfriend was questioned.
Ma'am, I'm Detective Plum.
He was charged with first-degree murder.
The arrest of Eric Hayden.
After Hayden's arrest, police began to piece together a picture of the gruesome events of May 12, 1995. They speculated that Eric Hayden had gained entry to the victim's home, probably through some false pretense. A brutal assault and murder followed shortly thereafter. At some point, Hayden lingered over his victim, enjoying a cigarette. He placed it on the night table and covered the victim with a sheet. He then wiped his bloody hands on the sheet. As he left the scene, one of the victim's slippers jammed in the door, propping it open. It had been the open door that first attracted attention to the crime scene. Though the suspect was in custody and evidence strongly linked him to the crime, Detective Klomp's case was not airtight. Hayden's lawyers asserted that the digital technology was too new to be relied upon at the trial. They argued that the enhanced images might have been altered or tampered with. Any new forensic technology undergoes intense legal and scientific scrutiny.
Hold it right there.
Hundreds of cases have been lost through improper evidence handling procedures. At the heart of the defense team's argument was their view that a virtual image might falsely incriminate a very real and innocent man.
Some amino black on it.
Had Hayden's attorneys been successful in this challenge, losing those prints as evidence would have seriously damaged the prosecution's case. But Eric Berg took extra care to explain the process to the members of the jury and to let them decide for themselves.
We took this into court, we took the equipment with us, we set it up, we took the sheet that we originally received from King County, and we actually captured the image in court, brought it into the computer, performed all of the steps that we had done, and printed out the image, and we were able to show the jury that everything we did there is the same as what we did before, and the result is the same, and it's repeatable.
Satisfied that Berg's digital enhancement techniques were sound, credible, repeatable, and damning, the jury needed only 3 hours to return their verdict: guilty of murder in the first degree.
This technology was incredible. It helped us solve the case much faster than we would have been able to having just gone out and contacting people or waiting for additional information to come in. This left no doubt in anyone's mind that this was the killer. It positively identified the killer.
Those prints, which had seemed to be just smudges at first, had finally yielded their secrets to the new digital imaging technology. Ultimately, they betrayed Eric Hayden to justice. Hayden left behind his handprint, thinking it was an illegible smudge. He didn't know that computer enhancement could turn that faint residue into a clear picture of guilt. Other criminals take greater pains to conceal the traces of their crimes, but the remnants of murder aren't so easy to hide. Forensics has ways of flushing them out. On a frigid January morning in 1987, a fur trapper was checking his traps in the blizzard-bound Cactus Flats region of California's Big Bear. It was hard going in such miserable weather. At about 11 that morning, he noticed a large oblong object covered in the new blanket of snow. There in the wilderness lay an abandoned mattress. The strange find seemed innocuous enough, but as the trapper checked around it, he made a macabre discovery. He hurried to the nearest telephone and summoned the police. Homicide Sergeant Gary Stroop of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department responded to the call.
When we got there, it was just starting to snow again, and it's probably about 18 degrees. So we were trying to do the scene as fast as we could so we could get out of there before we got stranded.
Beneath the mattress lay two bodies, a man and a woman, both murdered. Stroop found that in one way the weather had worked in his favor. The cold had protected the bodies against decomposition. He was also fortunate to find the bodies intact.
Check down there. See if there's anything.
There's a lot of animal activity up there. There's bears, mountain lions, coyotes, you name it. Had the weather been warmer, we probably would have had animal activity on the bodies.
Footprints, anything?
But who were the victims? Who had taken their lives?
tell you one thing.
The only clues at the scene were the victims and the mattress. The man had some distinctive tattoos that resembled the kind worn by convicts.
I see blood down there.
The detectives tried to identify him by checking prison records.
Homicide, Sergeant Stroop.
Sergeant Stroop's hunch about the tattoos paid off.
No problem. Those glasses
The fingerprints taken from the man matched those of an ex-convict named Richard Crisson.
Yeah.
The woman was identified as his girlfriend, Shanna Thole.
Yeah. No, just...
Autopsy evidence showed that both victims had died of multiple shotgun blasts. Through prison records, detectives were able to locate and question Richard Crisson's family. Crisson's brother told police that Richard and Shanna had gone to Victorville to see a man by the name of Archie Woods.
Richie and Shanna. Yeah, Officer Barnes, I called you earlier.
According to the brother, Crisson dealt drugs for Woods, who was a motorcycle gang member. This information, along with a background check of Woods, made him the detective's prime suspect. The police paid a visit to Archie Woods. His house lay in a secluded area 20 miles from where the victims were found. Woods wasn't at home. The detectives were greeted by Archie's girlfriend, Sherry Mills. She told the officers she didn't know where he was, but reluctantly agreed to let them in. Even before they entered Archie Woods' home, a possible clue caught their eye. On the front porch, beside the door, they found 2 spots that appeared to be blood. The stains could have been nothing, or they could have been the clue that would break the case wide open. It was too soon to tell. The detectives hoped to find the answer inside. Police investigating the deaths of Richard Crisson and Shanna Thole chased the only lead they had. At the home of drug dealer Archie Woods, they sought any clues they could find.
What time did Richard and Shauna leave? Still awake?
The detectives informed Woods' girlfriend, Sherry Mills, that they were told Shanna and Richard had visited the house.
You had some friends over?
Mills admitted that
Yeah.
Crisson and Thole had indeed been
used to
there,
do. We have
but only
a
to spend the night on their way somewhere
Yeah,
else.
so who was it last
She
night?
had no idea of their destination.
Well, it was our friend Rich and
Inside the house, detectives saw more brown spots that resembled blood. The house smelled of fresh paint. In the back bedroom, they found several paint cans. There was no sign of a mattress. If the murders occurred in this bedroom, police suspected that the paint covered crucial evidence. Police needed a way to see beneath it to look for evidence of a murder. It was the only way they could connect the homicides to this potential crime scene. They ordered a search warrant and then notified the crime scene unit that they had a difficult problem to solve. In the yard, officers noticed several wide, low-profile tire tracks, consistent with those made by a sports car. The woman victim, Shanna Thole, was last seen driving her high-performance sports car. The obvious bloodstains were examined, and the visible evidence was collected. Even so, the police were stymied. If the blood found at the house matched Thole and Crisson's, it could be explained as coming from a fistfight. There was not enough blood in plain sight to prove murder with a shotgun. It seemed as though the entire investigation had literally hit a wall. Forensic expert David Stockwell of the Sheriff's Scientific Investigation Division thought an alternative light source might reveal evidence hidden behind the paint in Wood's house. The alternate light source, or ALS, is a variable intensity laser beam typically used to highlight body fluid evidence on clothing or at a crime scene. Various fluids reflect specific frequencies of light. By adjusting the frequency of the laser, invisible evidence can be seen. Forensic technicians use tinted goggles and reflection-enhancing chemicals to make trace body fluids glow under the laser beam. Here, simulated bloody footprints become too faint to see with the naked eye. But with the right chemicals sprayed on them, and with the laser of the ALS set at the proper frequency, they fluoresce. In theory, at least, blood evidence could be made to glow, even from behind a coat of paint. But it would take the precise combination of chemicals, goggle tints, and laser frequencies to penetrate the painted layer.
The ALS is very good at picking up certain biological fluids, such as semen, but is not typically used to find blood because blood in itself is usually visible to the naked eye. What we were doing with the ALS was to see through that opaque layer of paint to see underneath it and what was there.
But would it work in such an unorthodox application at the home of Archie Woods? Police in San Bernardino had never used an ALS in this manner before. It was not built to illuminate an entire wall. They had to slowly comb small areas, hoping that the light could see through the paint and reveal any evidence beneath.
Okay, Richard, take your goggles off.
Little by little, they succeeded. With the ALS, the grim events at the Woods house were brought to light. There on the wall, beneath the fresh paint, was a wide splash pattern of darkened blood that had been all but invisible to the naked eye. This was the breakthrough police hoped for. They could now read the stain patterns on the wall to determine what happened. As shown here with this colored fluid, blood shed in violence can behave in several ways. It can drip, making a circular spot. Its diameter depends on how far and how much of the blood has fallen. It can form a series of streaks when flung off an object, such as a knife slashing through the air. This is called casting off. But another, equally telling kind of bloodstain appeared on Archie Wood's wall.
The largest of all bloodstains that I've ever seen at crime scenes are produced by what is called arterial spurting. And in this case, what I was seeing underneath the paint on the wall was in fact the bloodstain size consistent with arterial spurting.
The spurting patterns on the wall were consistent with the location of the wounds found on Chrisen and Thole. The ALS painted a grim picture of their violent death. The next problem was how to preserve the bloodstains for use as evidence in court. Without proof positive of arterial spurting, a shrewd defense team might claim that only a fistfight had taken place in that room, not a murder, and certainly not two murders. The ALS had illuminated the evidence bit by bit, but now the laser had to shine on the entire wall in order to take a photograph.
Hey, George, look around. Richard. What do I call you, George?
Investigators used a technique called painting with light.
Okay.
While the camera shutter was held open, the ALS was shown on the wall from left to right and top to bottom until the entire wall had been recorded through the course of several minutes. When the negatives were developed, they provided a clear, admissible picture of what the ALS revealed. That was good news for Sergeant Stroop.
With the pattern that we had on that wall with the use of the laser, it was obvious it was high velocity and a large amount of it, much more so than you'd ever have gotten from somebody with a bloody nose or getting beat up.
The evidence of violent death in that fateful room was mounting. The exposed blood patterns revealed that at the time they were shot, Shanna Thole and Richard Chrisen were lying in the bed, presenting no potential threat to their assailant. Meanwhile, their alleged killer was still at large.
That's what I was saying.
Okay, fine.
In San Bernardino, the search for Archie Woods, suspected of killing Richard Crisson and Shanna Thole, took on new urgency.
He's making a call right now.
To avoid being implicated in the killings, Wood's girlfriend cooperated with authorities.
No, he left a little bit later.
She disclosed to the detectives that Archie was in Modesto, visiting his little girl on her birthday.
So Richard and Shauna were already gone by the time he...
On Friday, the day Detective Stroop was gathering evidence at Archie's home, Archie himself was already under arrest in a neighboring county for carrying a concealed weapon in his car. He was driving a sports car at the time. Shanna Thole's sports car. From his cell in the San Bernardino jail, Woods maintained his innocence in the double homicide. He claimed that the murders were committed by members of his motorcycle gang. According to Woods, on the night of the murder, gang members asked Woods to lure Richard Crisson to his home. Woods claimed that after Crisson and Thole had arrived, he left his house as the gang instructed. Woods refused to identify the gang members involved.
Archie stuck with his story that he did not know who the other people were that had come into the house, that they were alive when he left and dead when he came back. But he would not ever give up the names of the other individuals that were involved.
Archie Woods said that he had then panicked and dumped the bodies in Big Bear. But with the help of the ALS, the police discovered the crucial piece of trace blood evidence that shot holes in Archie's story. The reclined position of the victims, as indicated by the bloodstains on the wall, just didn't add up to a violent confrontation. Detectives pieced together a likely scenario for the events of that night. Crisson and Thole had come to Archie's home to settle a dispute over a drug deal gone wrong. There was a long night of discussion and argument.
We gotta do something. I mean, he's got all this stuff, right?
Apparently, the disagreement was not resolved to Archie's satisfaction. But he let Crisson and Thole think an accord had been reached. The couple went to bed, unaware of the heavy price that Archie planned to exact from them that night. Police believe that when he thought they were sound asleep, Woods struck his helpless victims, taking their lives with blast after blast from a shotgun. Woods' one true statement was that he had dumped the bodies and the blood-soaked bedding in Big Bear, thinking no one would ever find them. Back at his house, he had first tried to clean the wall, but the blood wouldn't come off. He then covered the evidence with a thick coat of paint. But the alternate light source defied his efforts to conceal his crime. It clearly showed the pattern of the bloodstains through the opaque coat.
You know, when looking at that, there's no doubt in my mind they were killed here. They were in this bed. And, you know, that's going to show everybody, you know, what we know, or help us prove what we know, or convince a jury of what we know. And it did.
Archie Woods was given 2 life sentences for the double murder of Richard Crisson and Shanna Thole. Every criminal leaves evidence behind. The key is to know how to find it. But the most compelling evidence is also the least tangible. It's the criminal's knowledge of his actions. A new technique is testing a way of tapping the suspect's mind to turn a criminal's own memory against him. Larry Farwell is the director and chief scientist of the Human Brain Research Laboratory in Fairfield, Iowa. He has developed a new computerized system known as brain fingerprinting. It reads the memory centers of the human brain. He believes that brain fingerprinting will one day be used to positively link perpetrators to their crimes.
Brain fingerprinting is a scientific method of determining whether certain information is stored in a brain or is not stored in the brain. If an individual has committed a crime, he'll have certain information relevant to that crime stored in his brain. So we can use brain fingerprinting to determine scientifically whether he committed the crime or not.
When someone commits a crime, his brain records it as a memory. Brain fingerprinting seeks to reveal that memory by showing the suspect evidence taken from the crime scene.
Now I'm going to be putting this headband on your head.
A headband with sensors is placed on the subject. A series of pictures or words is flashed on the screen. The computer records the brain waves produced in response to what the subject sees. The responses are recorded as a waveform. By analyzing the pattern of waves, Farwell can determine if the subject is recognizing what he's seeing.
So when you have a situation where a crime is committed, there are certain details about the crime that only the criminal would know, then you can test, does this brain have those details stored in it? If so, then the individual committed the crime. If not, then not.
The FBI is at the forefront of developing and evaluating new technology. After hearing of Farwell's system, they put it to the test. The FBI tested brain fingerprinting on their own agents at the Bureau's training facility at Quantico, Virginia.
We conducted a study on FBI agents, and the purpose of this study was to see if we could determine whether an individual is an FBI agent or not based on his or her brainwaves. If we can determine an FBI agent, then we could determine whether somebody is an agent of some, say, foreign intelligence organization or a criminal group, just based on their brain responses.
Each subject was presented with a series of words on a computer screen. Many were FBI acronyms or terms familiar only to agents. The FBI agents were specifically told to do everything they could to conceal from Farwell that they were in any way connected with the Bureau. The participant's brain response to each stimulus was measured by electrodes on a headband. The electrodes were wired to the brainwave analysis software of Farwell's system.
So what we did is to present stimuli, phrases, that only an FBI agent, because of their training, would know, mixed in with others. The FBI agents recognized them. We picked up the brain responses. We knew that they were FBI agents.
The principle behind the brain fingerprinting system is very simple. Farwell has discovered that the memory centers of the human brain respond to the sight of familiar stimuli with the distinct change in electrical activity. He calls this change a murmur.
And that is the specific brain response that we measure, that we analyze with a computer, in order to determine whether an individual recognizes the words or pictures that we flashed on the screen that are relevant to the crime or to whatever it is that we're investigating.
When the subject sees anything on the screen, it creates a pattern of brain activity. A murmur is increased brain activity produced when the subject recognizes what he's seeing.
This headband will measure the electrobrain
The test participants who did not work for the FBI did not recognize the specific FBI stimuli, so no murmurs were detected.
Some of them relevant to the FBI and some of them not.
Researchers with the United States Navy also heard the claims made about the system. They devised a test of their own to see if brain fingerprinting could distinguish military medical students from civilians. They used a list of acronyms specific to medicine and the military. Lieutenant Commander Rene Hernandez conducted the test.
The test was 100% accurate. They were able to tell each and every one. The trick with this is not so much if the technique works properly. The trick is if you ask the right questions. Because if they had not come up with a group of really good acronyms that only the students would know, then they wouldn't be able to determine the difference between the medical students and the staff, for example. So the trick is in being clever enough to ask the correct questions, because the brain will always answer it honestly.
Careful preparation of the words or pictures for a session is vital for accurate, useful results. The questions must be phrased in such a way that when a murmur occurs, it is clear why. In a murder investigation, both a witness to a shooting and the shooter might show a murmur when confronted with the murder weapon.
You have two people, only one person actually committed the crime. You have another person who simply saw it. They have the same information in their brain, so you have to get that, you have to ask the questions properly.
Rigorously constructed lab tests are one thing, but how would the brain fingerprinting system work on the front lines of a murder investigation? Could Dr. Farwell's computer read the mind of an actual killer? Like a page torn from a science fiction novel, brain fingerprinting might be the next century's most powerful new forensic tool. No criminal's secrets would be safe when his own brain waves could bring him to justice. Captain Blaine Corral, commander of the Investigations Division of the Alexandria, Virginia Police, has also tested the system. Though he was initially skeptical about its use in the real world, he was quickly won over.
The vision I had was like of the Three Stooges with a salad bowl sitting on the top of someone's head with wires coming out of it. And I thought, not only would this technique or this technology never really be useful, but there's no way in the world it would ever be accepted by the law enforcement community.
Corral compared brain fingerprinting with the polygraph, the lie detector used by law enforcement for many years. The polygraph is still not admissible in court, but has become a standard tool to guide police.
The polygraph works on the theory that you can't control your heart rate or something called your galvanic skin response or your breathing patterns. The brain fingerprinting sort of takes that a step further and recognizes the fact that you can't control the electrical activity in your brain.
A polygraph registers only stress or emotional responses, such as heart and respiration rates and sweating. By analyzing the readings, the operator tries to discern whether a subject is being truthful or deceptive in his answers. But in some cases, the polygraph can be fooled. Brain fingerprinting is often more general. It can identify the presence of hidden information in persons fraudulently claiming either knowledge or ignorance of certain facts. But again, it reveals only the presence of the information, not the details.
So they're going to both help us toward the same end, which is ultimately to find out the truth about what we're investigating and formulate the best case for presentation in court, but they're going to sort of attack it from different angles. Both can be very crucial to a successful case.
Serious questions remain about the wholesale application of Dr. Farwell's invention. Would a murmur be revealed if a killer were in a drunken blackout or a psychotic state when he took his victim's life? In such cases, there might not be a brain fingerprint after the fact. What if right after he committed the crime, the killer received a severe head trauma?
But that's what actually happened with the the person who was the bodyguard who was in the car with Princess Diana. Everybody thinks he's trying to cover up something. He had such a severe traumatic injury, he probably will never remember that because the brain never was healthy enough to store that information into long-term memory.
In most cases, brain fingerprinting a witness or an accomplice can reveal knowledge of all kinds of crime, from espionage to terrorist plots. At least that's the promise of this technology. Brain fingerprinting is not yet admissible in the United States, but it might be only a matter of time before it becomes a routine tool. The relatively new technique of DNA profiling is known to be so dead-on accurate that genetic evidence is readily accepted. Ultimately, scientists and criminal investigators agree that brain fingerprinting shows great potential in murder investigations. In a shooting death with no witnesses, the killer would be the only person with intimate knowledge of the crime. With Dr. Farwell's computer, the murderer's own brain could become a witness for the prosecution. Technology is providing new ways to reveal evidence that would have been lost or unavailable just a few years ago. Today, investigators can peer beneath paint, lift a smudged palm print from a bedsheet, and perhaps even tap into a suspect's memory to find the truth. There may be no way to completely stop crime, but forensic science is finding ever more ingenious tactics to catch criminals.
Couples in love make promises in sickness and in health, to have and to hold. But when the past catches up to you, a couple can find the real meaning of the phrase, love you to death.
Am I ever gonna love, gonna love, gonna love again? Am I ever gonna love, gonna love, gonna love again?
When she was found, they were planning a wedding. And then that wedding was less than 48 hours away.
Never would have thought that I would have been going to her funeral that next week instead of her wedding. Never would have thought it.
She come in the door and she said, I'm here to get a marriage license. A lot of things happened after that. I don't want to cry.
Hours away from becoming a bride, Molly Watson's story takes a tragic turn when a stranger makes a discovery on a country road.
April 27th of 2018. It was a Friday night.
Glenn McSparron is taking a shortcut from his mother's home there in Monroe County.
Didn't really think nothing of it, just a typical night. It's remote. It's really grown up. You're driving in between trees and horseweeds down to the creek. You got to turn as you go down into it and go across it because the road kind of curves.
That night, he says he saw headlights.
He saw a car come up and kind of cut him off, put their headlights right into his view.
And once I got a little bit closer, I could see that there was a car, and I thought that they wanted past me, so I pulled over to the side of the road. Then I could see another car parked over on the right, facing away from me.
He said he saw a short white guy driving the car.
Glenn McSparron described the car with the older white man as an old grandma car.
I couldn't hardly see him because of all the glare, and I just kind of turned my head towards the window and I said, "Hey, is somebody stuck down there?" And how did he say that? He said, "I don't know where they're at. It's going to be a while."
Glenn McSparron had a brief verbal exchange with this older white male, and the other individual indicated that Glenn needed to go around a different way.
So I just backed my truck up a little bit and went back to the west. The more I thought about it, I was like, something's not right. I talked to my mom and my brother for a minute, and I told them, I said, "I'm gonna go back through there."
On his way back, just 30 minutes later, a horrific scene, a body in his headlights.
I stayed in my truck, and I called 911.
I don't know what the hell's going on here.
They wanted me to just make sure if she was alive or not.
Ma'am. Ma'am. Oh my God. I don't think she's alive, no.
I seen if she was cold to the touch or if she had a pulse, and she did not. And I looked in her eyes and I could tell that she was gone.
Her eyes are open. I swear to God, she's dead.
She was essentially shot execution style. She had been shot once in the back of the head at point blank range.
The idea that it never happens here, in this country corner of Missouri, is pretty much right.
123.
Police go into full investigative mode, and there's evidence to be found. In the muddy crime scene, they find tire tracks, remarkably well preserved.
And there appeared to be markings that looked like two O's.
I think everybody looking thought that it was probably a Goodyear tire. I came upon this shirt laying in the road, went around the shirt and past it, and then I stopped and I'm thinking, we're kind of close to the crime scene here. I probably better pick that up just in case.
That t-shirt, we later learned, had gunshot residue on it, had Molly Watson's blood.
On a road leading away from the scene, they find an empty box.
It was an empty .22 caliber ammunition box. A .22 would be considered a small caliber firearm, along with several other calibers.
An autopsy later recovers a bullet.
It revealed that it was a small caliber weapon that was used to kill her.
The bullet that they found was too damaged to be able to match it up with any particular firearm.
All we can say about the projectile is that it would be consistent with a small caliber ammunition.
We initially run the vehicle registration, things of that nature. We were eventually able to figure out that the victim was Molly Watson.
Police wake up the family in the middle of the night with some pretty bad news.
My wife woke me up, said, "Your dad's on the phone. He doesn't sound good. Something happened." I'll never forget my dad. He said, "Timmy," he said, "the highway patrol just left our house." I was like, "What happened?" He said, "They found Molly dead in the road." I was like, "What?"
You know how old she is now?
Police want to know what brought Molly to this dark, desolate place, and even more puzzling, who'd have a reason to kill her?
Molly Watson's body was found
Wearing her engagement ring
on her left ring finger. They were planning a wedding.
Wedding of her dreams.
That wedding was less than 48 hours away.
We always heard about the wedding. I was very excited about the wedding. You know, the colors, the theme, the decorations.
Molly has a wedding planner who's working on the details.
There's a lot of burgundy and gold. Kind of reminded me of like a Renaissance kind of theme.
Two dresses, she could not make up her mind.
This dress, as you will see with it on me, I show it with me wearing one ball gown crinoline.
Molly Watson is 35. Her friends describe her as sweet, creative, bubbly.
Me and Molly were both kind of goofballs, but she was like my best friend.
Lots of artwork,
costuming. She was really good at that.
She has a YouTube channel. She plays with makeup and shows off her sewing.
She wanted to start like a weekly vlog where she would, just talk about herself or what's going on in her life.
I work in education right now. I have 2 degrees in psychology, a bachelor's and a master's.
She wanted to be a singer for a long time, and she had a really good singing voice.
I am going to sing the healing incantation from Tangled. Flower, gleam and glow, let your power shine.
Molly was married in her early 20s. The relationship didn't last more than a few years. During the breakup, she's pregnant and has a son.
Declan was her world. She would take him to the zoo, she would take him about anywhere with her. That was just her world right there.
Later, she dates a woman she'd known since they were in kindergarten together. But that relationship falls apart when Molly meets somebody new at the prison where she works as a corrections officer, a lieutenant named James Addy. He's 16 years older than she is, and Molly's brother says the couple doesn't spend much time with her family.
There was definitely an age gap there. At first, it was weird for us, but, everybody kind of got past it.
I asked her, what does your family think about him? And she was really kind of hesitant. And she said, my family doesn't really like him. They've only met him a few times.
But Addie's brother looked up to him.
Growing up, Jim, he was a role model and example. He was in the Marine Corps. And then from the Marine Corps, he got out after Desert Storm and just created a life.
Molly told her brother that James mentioned he'd been married a few times. One marriage to a woman named Melanie resulted in 2 children, Ben and Emma.
I loved Melanie. She was always nice, always kind, funny. It was just Melanie. The type of women that Jim liked were very, very nice, very kind.
At this point, James and Molly seem to be a couple, and he's quite the romantic. He writes, "You're truly the love of my life, now and forever. You are my everything. I adore you."
After 7 years of having this relationship with James, she surprises her family. She suddenly announces, "I'm engaged."
You were booked for her makeup and hair 3 years ago.
Yes.
What did you know about Molly and the wedding and her fiance?
I remember meeting her. She was so excited. She wanted a Disney theme.
A very wonderful wedding had been planned at the Stony Creek Inn. Molly had invited her family here to come to this event.
She was bubbly, she was happy, she enjoyed talking about her wedding. James was kind of the opposite of Molly. He was very quiet, didn't show much enthusiasm. I just thought he was just a groom along for the ride.
And then, according to Molly's brother, in the middle of planning the wedding, James gives Molly some terrible news about Melanie, the mother of his children.
James had told Molly, who told me, that Melanie was involved in December in a really bad car wreck and that she was on life support. And they didn't think she was going to make it.
When I was reaching out to Molly to try to get a meeting scheduled, she had mentioned that James's ex-wife had passed away from a car accident over the holidays. So he had to go do funeral stuff with his kids when we were trying to meet.
There are some last-minute changes. James and Molly cut their guest list in half, and it turns out his daughter, Emma, won't need the hair and makeup team.
The plan was that she had a stepdaughter who she was planning to do hair and makeup on.
I did also want to let you know that it is just going to be me getting hair and makeup done. My soon-to-be stepdaughter has decided she and a friend are going to do each other's hair and makeup, and so we're just going to go that route.
Molly worries that her fiance may be getting cold feet.
Are you changing your mind?
Not at all.
Then what?
It worries me that you were changing yours.
I wasn't.
Good.
2 days to go till the wedding. The couple are meeting at the county recorder's office to get their marriage license. He remembers Molly well.
The cameras I got in the back of my office for security filmed all that. Molly Watson come in the door just shortly before 4 o'clock, and she said, "I'm here to get a marriage license." And she was quite pleasant to talk to. We had a good time.
You can see James there in his uniform, running late, hurrying inside.
And then Mr. Addy walked in the door, and he was not smiling. He was acting like this was not the place he wanted to be in. She reached right over to him and was touching his arm and stuff, and she would pat him on the back, and she would lean into him a little bit.
He watches as they leave the office, hand in hand.
That's just tough. It really is, because she was a sweet girl. A lot of things happened after that. I don't want to cry.
Just hours later, that marriage certificate is found at the crime scene.
Our marriage certificate was located in her car.
That had her name in there as well as her fiance's name.
Now, in the middle of the night, there's something they've got to do right away. They head to her fiance's house.
So they went to his house that evening.
While the trooper is there in the home, he makes a startling discovery. There's another woman in James Addy's house. She asks the trooper, "What are you doing here?" And I imagine the trooper probably felt much of the same thing. What are you doing here?
It turns out the woman who was there is James Addy's wife, Melanie Addy.
She's his wife? The guy's living a complete double life. What is going on here?
When police show up at James Addy's door to tell him that Molly, his fiancée, is dead, his wife is as surprised to see them as they are to see her.
About 2:30, I think, I saw police car lights out my window. It was very strange to see that. I didn't know what was happening.
She wasn't ready for everything that was about to come. She wasn't prepared that he had this whole other life that was happening without her.
He admits that he was cheating on Melanie with Molly, and that yes, they had been engaged to be married.
Mr. Addy became visibly hot and uncomfortable during that interview. So hot and uncomfortable that he actually walked over to his window, opened it, and put a box fan there to blow the cool air in. James Addy volunteered that the last time he had spoken with Molly Watson was earlier in that evening, and showed the police a screenshot of a 22-minute phone call from her to him.
For police, everything has changed since that very first moment that they walked into the Addy's house. This man has a wife. He was sweating in the interview. He's got phone and text messages that seem ever so suspicious. So for police, there's plenty. What do? They arrest him. They charge him with first-degree murder.
Now the trick is building a case.
You doing all right, sir? Okay. Not really.
Watching your husband loaded into a police car has to be hard for Melanie when you think about the snapshots of her life before. Tell me about meeting James Addy.
I was working at a convenience store, and he was a customer. He came in a lot and finally asked me out.
And once you two hit it off, did he pop the question pretty soon?
Very quickly, maybe 6 months.
That's the wedding photo. You look so young, both of you.
We didn't have a lot of money, and we had Ben on the way very quickly.
When Ben came into the picture, man, I remember going up to their house. It was always fun. So happy.
A few years later, Emma comes along. So your family's growing.
It was exactly what we wanted. We had these 2 great kids. I was a stay-at-home mom. He went to work. It was a very traditional way to do things. I thought it was very good.
I love that picture, yeah. All of us together at Christmas time.
As the years go on, their lives seem so normal. James clashes with his teen son, but Melanie says she felt her husband was dedicated to his family and very loyal. She never suspected that he was being unfaithful. Did you get any sense of whether he was contented and happy in the marriage?
He seemed the same all the time.
Melanie did admit that the marriage had its ups and downs, but in her mind, they had always been able to work through whatever the issues were. This was her reality. Everything was the same, but the fact is, it wasn't. James Addy was in a completely different place.
He was over it. He was done. He didn't love her anymore.
James Addy, for the past 7 years, had been living 2 lives.
How was he able to separate both of these lives?
He's a very good liar.
At one point, he takes a trip to Florida on his own. What was that trip about?
He told me it was a trip related to his work, where they were doing some training.
He took the extra step and printed out what looked like a business letter, made it look official that that's what he was doing, but he was taking the trip to Florida with Molly.
As I talk to Melanie, knowing where this is going, it's hard not to be a little incredulous. But no matter what I ask, she's consistent. She did not know the truth about what was going on.
He would get off work at 3, and usually he would get home at 5. And I would say, well, why are you always so late? And that would be an argument. He didn't want to tell me anything.
Any suspicions?
Not about an affair, no.
So let's go back then to April 27, 2018. Any strange behavior on his part?
No, not at all. Nothing. He just seemed like he always did. About 7 o'clock, he came in to the living room where I was and said he was going to a friend's house.
Did it strike you as unusual or odd?
I remember being irritated that I wanted him to just be home, and he had a hard time staying home.
Do you remember when he came home?
I was asleep.
And whatever time James Addy got home, well, Melanie says that she woke up at 2 in the morning to the sound of his snoring, and she says she did what she normally does, move to the couch in the living room.
The police tell you
yes,
that your husband has a dead fiance?
Yes.
And he's engaged to the woman?
Yeah.
And you're learning all of this in one night?
Immediately, yeah.
And you've been married for
23 years.
What did you think?
I can't even tell you. It was just mind-boggling. It made no sense at all. None.
Were you angry? Were you hurt? What were you feeling?
Probably just disbelief in the beginning. It didn't seem right. This was not my life.
Did you think that your husband was capable of murder?
Yes. It just seemed like something he would do to fix a problem. He was a pretty selfish person. He could be controlling and intimidating, and it could be challenging.
Melanie Addy begins searching her house. She searches a loft-type area above the garage, which she rarely went into, and found a photo album.
She finds several photos of Jim and Molly together, smiling, a happy couple.
She found the photos of them in Florida on this trip that she had thought was a harmless business trip for him to go on, that he was actually there with his fiance, getting ready to get married.
Were you asking yourself, how could I have missed this?
Oh, absolutely, every day. Every day. How do you not see this? I guess because I wasn't supposed to see it.
So he's under arrest, he's in jail.
Yes.
Do you go visit him?
The following week, we were both in tears. Both in tears.
What is he saying to you?
That he's sorry. He's very sorry for the affair, but he insists that he was not the killer, that he is not responsible for this.
Was there a part of you that felt for him on any level?
Absolutely, because I felt like, oh, I have to take care of him. This is what we do. We take care of each other.
Did you look at him suddenly as a stranger, as somebody you didn't know?
I looked at him as someone I didn't want back.
Now investigators have got to untangle this mess. They have to have evidence. They have a t-shirt, the ammunition box, and now there's one other item they find near that dirt road. A cell phone. Molly's cell phone. That phone now means that prosecutors can take the case to the courtroom. There's another voice that will be heard.
Like they say, deceased person doesn't speak, but it's almost like Molly was speaking from the grave.
James Addy, the former prison guard, now underguard himself. At trial, lead investigator Bradley Ream takes the stand to testify about that jaw-dropping moment in the Addy home.
I asked her who she was. She replied, "I am his wife." I was like, whoa. I was wondering what was going on. And he told me that I got myself involved in something I shouldn't have.
Glenn McSparron testifies about finding Molly.
When you first went to the water crossing the first time, was there another car present?
Yes, there was. We came upon a pair of headlights down by the creek, and then I could tell there was another car facing away from me.
Glenn McSparron testifies about seeing that man at the crime scene, but in a blow to the prosecution, he can't identify James Addy as the man he saw.
I couldn't get a really 100% clear look at him.
But McSparron's description of the car that man was driving, that old grandma car, police say matches Addy's car. And then they take a good look at the tires. Prosecutors say one of the tires on Addy's car, a Goodyear, is just the kind that could leave a 00 impression like the one found near Molly Watson's body.
It wasn't just that 00 print from the side of the Goodyear tire. Officers have something more. What prosecutors call a perfect tire print in the mud, just a few feet from Molly's body.
A state crime lab expert testifies that he compared the right rear tire on Addy's car to a cast that was made at the scene of the crime next to Molly's body.
And what conclusion did you draw, if any, about the tire and the cast?
My conclusion was that particular tire made that particular impression.
Prosecutors are convinced that this tire track matches Addy's car. The defense is saying, not so fast.
All right, I'd like to talk to you about this comparison that we just had that states
there is no widely accepted scientific principle behind an examiner looking at one tire and looking at a cast and saying they look the same to me.
State's Exhibit 67. Could you explain to the jury what they're looking at here?
That is an empty ammo box of .22 caliber.
A prosecution witness testifies that bullets found in the .22 caliber rifle found in James Addy's home are consistent with the Thunderbolt ammunition, the kind that came in that empty ammo box they found. Even so, that doesn't prove that it's the murder weapon.
Prosecutors call a long parade of highway patrol investigators and criminalists, and then they introduce a key item of evidence.
A cell phone. Molly's cell phone.
Molly Watson's cell phone was a vital link in the chain of evidence for prosecutors.
Information from her cell phone did tell us that she had driven from her home to this location while she was on the phone with James Addy.
Investigators are poring over all these text messages between James and Molly, and what they're hoping to do is reconstruct the events leading up to her killing. And maybe they'll find even a triggering moment that caused it to happen.
And investigators say there's a reference to that story about Addy's wife Melanie dying after a car crash. Prosecutors say Addy texted Molly that his ex-wife's funeral was happening the day before their wedding.
The funeral is tomorrow.
I'm sorry, sweetness. I love you so, so much.
Why would James Addy lie? Why tell Molly that his ex-wife Melanie was dead? Some speculate that maybe he hoped the story about the car crash would cause his fiancée to postpone the wedding and the collision of his two lives. But instead, it may have sped up his day of reckoning.
Molly, at a certain point, did try to look into this and question this, according to some of the things brought up in court.
Forensic searches of Molly's phones indicated that the day before she was murdered, she was looking for Melanie Addy's obituary.
Was obviously unable to find an obituary for Melanie Addy.
Prosecutors point out that Molly's online search happens the day before her murder and argue this theory. Molly figures out that James's wife isn't dead and confronts him, and they say that's what led him to kill her.
Did James Addy have a plan to see Molly that night?
As stated here in the exhibit, the text message says, "I think I'm going to see you tonight." And that was sent from James's purple phone to Molly.
He knew. He knew what was going to happen. He knew how that date was going to end. Earlier in the evening of April 27th, before James Addy departed his home, he had sent text messages from himself to himself.
Have a meeting tonight at 8, normal place. You have to be there.
James Addy seems to be almost firing himself up to do something drastic.
Don't be a again. Let's go, man.
It was as if one part of him was telling the other to, come on, we can do this. Let's go.
Trying to psych himself up for something. Obviously now we know what it is. Don't be a man. Let's go, man. He's talking himself into it. He's getting himself ready.
Molly was lured to this Monroe County road. A 22-minute phone call and a 22-minute drive to her death.
For the next 30 minutes or so, police say that Addy's phones, both of them, are silent. No calls, no texting.
That is when he killed Molly Watson.
What could have or would have been James Addy's closest allies as a criminal defendant, his wife and his daughter, are now actually going to take the stand against him.
Were you aware that you were on a guest list to attend your dad's wedding? Will you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Emma Addy, E-M-M-A-A-D-D-I-E.
The evidence at trial showed that Emma Addy had actually met Molly Watson previously.
James's daughter, Emma, needed a costume.
And Dad said that he knew somebody who did that kind of thing. And that person was Molly, and he took me to go meet her, and she made a costume for me.
James had introduced Molly as a friend from work.
Did you know about his relationship with Molly?
No.
She articulated to the jury what she saw and heard and remembered from that night.
I was still up doing homework at around 10 p.m. And that's around the time that Dad came home.
On cross-examination, the defense really tries to create some doubt with timing. Maybe he was in the garage working on his car, maybe she didn't know.
You'd agree with me that back in this time frame that your dad would frequently be in the garage, correct?
Yes.
Emma's most damaging testimony may be about that bloody t-shirt. Remember the one that was found in the road near the crime scene?
The t-shirt becomes so important to this case because it's a one-of-a-kind t-shirt. And here's the kicker. It was made by James Addy's daughter, Emma.
Do you recognize that shirt?
Yes.
Right. How do you recognize that shirt?
She was able to identify it because she made it as a part of one of her classes. And so she was able to affirmatively say, that is a t-shirt that I made.
Okay, I know that's my shirt.
She gave it to her father.
I brought them home that day after the contest, and Dad said that he would take one to the garage just to use as rags.
Addie's defense says that's not proof, that maybe Addie had just given the t-shirt to Molly.
Is it so implausible that one fiance has a shirt that belonged to their fiance?
As far as your marriage with James Addy, can you describe it for the jury?
Testifying next, the woman James Addy allegedly said was dead, his now ex-wife Melanie Addy. She filed for divorce soon after his arrest.
It was good sometimes, it was bad sometimes. I thought we both tried to make it work.
You were called to testify. How hard was that?
It's horrible. It's just horrible. You don't want to be there. I don't want to be in a position where I'm hurting him. I don't want to do that.
So in April of 2018, were you still married to Mr. Addy and living in that same home? Yes. Did you have any plans to divorce at that point?
No. He'd always been very hard on me about you know, how a wife should act and how a wife should be. And then he did this. He had an affair, and that's okay. No, we were done. We were done.
James Addy didn't react to his ex-wife taking the stand, but everybody else did. Anybody watching was riveted.
Prosecutors also asked Melanie about that outrageous story, the one they say James told Molly, that Melanie was dead.
Were you in a horrible car crash in October of 2017 around Christmas or New Year's? No. And is it fair to say you did not pass away in April of 2018? That's correct.
After calling nearly 20 witnesses, the state rests its case.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
And now it's time for the defense to take its turn. All kinds of options here. They could introduce evidence, they could call witnesses, or they could put James Addy himself on the stand. Instead, they do none of the above.
Not putting up a case for the defense is fairly common because the argument is it's the state's burden to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt.
Once my client puts a witness on the stand, now we're in competition for who is more likable, for who do we believe more. You lose the state's burden and you take on a burden yourself.
If the evidence will show that the state does not have proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Your doubts are reasonable. Your doubts are reasonable because Jim did not kill Molly.
They attempted to raise enough reasonable doubt about the things that weren't there. There was no murder weapon. What would be the motive of a man in love killing his fiancée?
He was in love with Molly was the defense, and he was having an affair, but that didn't necessarily mean that he was the killer.
Closing arguments in this case ended up being on what would have been James and Molly's 3-year anniversary.
Molly Watson does not get to celebrate her 3-year wedding anniversary today, but you have the power to give her justice.
The jury deliberated about 2.5 hours the fate of James Addy and announced they had reached a unanimous decision.
All right, then. It's my understanding the jury has reached a verdict. Do I have a foreperson?
Yes, sir.
When the jury walked in, like 5 of the jury members looked at us. Like they glanced over, and I thought, okay, I don't know if this is a good sign or not.
Verdict reads as follows. As to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, James Addy, guilty of murder in the first degree.
The jury found James Addy guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Molly Watson and armed criminal action.
Oh, I was happy. I was so happy to hear that because my sister got justice.
Did you feel that your husband should have been found guilty of murder?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is he a killer?
Apparently.
You asked me earlier what I was surprised at during the trial.
During the entire portion of the trial, he failed to represent anything that I brought forward, sir.
Up until this point, James Addy has fully exercised his right to remain silent throughout the trial, but now he's ready to open up and give the court his version of what he says really happened.
There was no way that I could have done this crime.
And he's going to point to someone he says is the true killer.
Thank you, and have a seat.
We're here today on 18AC-CR01983, State versus James Addy. Medical's on today for final disposition.
2 months after his conviction, James Addy is formally sentenced.
Mr. Addy, having been convicted by a jury of your peers of the charge of murder in the first degree, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, that being the sentence mandated by law.
Once sentencing is over, the judge wants to hear from Addy about why he now claims his lawyer did not do a good job.
Anyone expecting regrets or remorse is in for quite a surprise.
Normally, criminal defendants keep their mouths shut, they say yes when they're supposed to, and they move on their way to get their appeal going.
Not James Addy. He is scheduled to spend the rest of his life in prison, but he's got plenty to say, beginning by reading a love letter to the woman he's convicted of killing.
Molly is the love of my life.
Addy insists that Molly was the love of his life. He says he misses her terribly and would have done anything to keep her happy. Addy is now asking for a new trial. He's complaining to the judge that his defense counsel was ineffective.
Honestly, let his defense attorney have it. He said that he did not think that TJ did a great job.
Can you give me an idea of what kind of stuff you wanted him to bring forward?
Cell phone records, Facebook posts that were in discovery that showed motive that somebody else would do.
Molly had an ex who, according to him, had stalked her, very much so had a motive to do harm to Molly as her wedding was approaching.
We reviewed all of the evidence collected during this investigation and presented the relevant admissible evidence at trial, and there was no evidence of any other person with a direct connection to Molly Watson's death.
That evidence pointed to one person, James Addy, who had the motive, means, and opportunity to take Molly Watson's life.
I would like to see him and ask him, what were you thinking? Why did you do this to us? Why did you do this to you?
You don't see yourself as a victim?
Not at all. Molly's the victim. She's not here. She lost her life.
You just think of the lyrics of that song that Molly loved so much from the movie Tangled.
Bring back what once was mine, what once was mine.
Just a couple of days ago at work, I'm a mechanic and we have our bay doors open, and out of the blue, this balloon came right up to me and it says, "We love you, we miss you," and that was Molly telling me, "Hey, we're watching you." So it definitely felt good.
Friday nights at 9 on ABC. Mean true crime.
True murder mystery.
Shocking.
Sex, betrayal, lies. A bombshell. The greatest true crime stories.
2020. Friday nights at 9.
A citizen was driving on Elm and Highway 2 where he saw smoke coming from the house. Local fire department responded in their engine. They arrived on scene. The house is fully ablaze. They kicked the door in. A firefighter entered the living room and through the heavy smoke crawled on the living room floor looking for people in the house. As he got to the hallway between the bedrooms, he bumped into something. He went to throw the blanket off so he could see. It was clear from what he saw there that something heinous had happened. And he came out to me and took me aside and said, "It looks really weird in there." Yeah, it was a gruesome scene.
February 28th of 2008, I was the lead detective working for the Spokane County Sheriff's Department at that time. I got a call at home about 5:30 in the morning calling me out to an incident that happened on Elm Street. It was completely unusual. So I wasn't really entirely sure what to expect.
This was my probably 5th month as a homicide detective. I was really new. So it was daunting.
When I first got there, the house was smoking still. There was firemen coming in and out. I went in through the front door. There was just a haze through the house, which kind of gave it a little bit of a haunted house effect.
Once I got in there, the whole scene, the way it was laid out, I said, yeah, I don't care who you are. It's something that you don't forget. All of the pictures had been removed from the wall and purposely placed face down on top of the couch, which led us to believe that it might be some ritualistic thing. There was blood everywhere in the hallway, blood stains all over the wall. It was impossible to get into the hallway without stepping in some form of blood pool. Once I came around the corner, I saw the body of a male there, partially covered still with a blanket, with a big, huge sword sticking out of him.
I have seen cases of knives and swords even, but I don't know that I've ever seen a broadsword like that. It was pretty big piece of work.
He was laying on top of a guitar in the hallway. He was covered in blood. The blood was all dried out from the fire. Clearly visible to me at the time was a huge incised wound to the side of the head right here, and a huge incised wound right to the side of the neck. I wasn't sure the sword was the murder weapon, but it was clearly some kind of sharp implement, like a knife. Just past the body of the male is an open doorway with the door standing open into a small bedroom. And literally shoved between the bed and the nightstand table is the body of a young female. She had been stabbed repeatedly, many, many, many times. A minimum number of 26.
She was on the floor, kind of like she was on her knees, leaning forward with her head towards the wall. And it looked like there was a samurai sword stuck completely through her neck.
But it turns out it's actually just propped in there. Whoever put it there tried several times to make it stick out of her neck. It was disturbing that somebody would brutalize them so badly, but part of me thought it was just look at me, look what I did. Look what I can do. It just seemed violent and unnecessary and excessive and just plain mean. And I felt really bad for her. Who might have been capable of committing such a crime? It seemed at once both personal in that they knew them and totally antisocial. They knew them, but they just didn't give a So
I had become fairly proficient at compartmentalizing. I don't connect myself to what happened there because I wouldn't be able to do my job. People don't call the police because they want to come and cry with them. That's not why I'm there. I've got a job to do. Number one, try to do an identification of the bodies because we didn't know who they were.
the nature of the posing, the nature of the injuries just seemed to have a bizarre feel to them. I've had training on ritualistic killings before, and some of the things that you saw in this scene were similar to what they teach us. Just actions for action's sake. No purpose behind them other than to just gratify the doer.
The supervisor of the forensic unit came out and said, "Boy, we have gold." I said, "Oh, do tell." She said, "There is a bloody fingerprint on the inside of the back door." I said, "I want to find whose print that is." That leads me to a suspect. That is what we call a clue. We're just going to take the whole door down to the forensic unit for fingerprint processing to swab the blood samples and all of that stuff that we needed to do to process that door. We're going to do it right away.
So as we finished examining the scene in the house, the homeowner showed up. Lori, she's standing out front of the house that's clearly burnt. She was clearly upset.
So I ran up, and I think my daughter was there. And we ran up to the line.
It was creepy, it was eerie. There was cops everywhere. One of the detectives came over and asked to talk to my mom. It was just so weird, like it was such a weird thing to hear. He said, "Did you have any weapons in the house?"
Do you own any knives and swords? I go, "Why?" He said, "Well, we just need to know." I go, "Well, yeah, my other son kind of collects them. He's got a display on his wall." And he goes, "Okay." And they left. And then we're sitting there just freaking out. Why would they ask me that?
My phone rang early in the morning, and I believe it was my son-in-law, Ian, and said, "The house is on fire on Elm Street. You need to come now."
My daughter, Katie, she goes, "Mom, there's someone in there. There's a deceased person inside."
And of course, we were counting people down that we knew could have been there, but they were okay.
We knew from talking to Lori that Lori lived in the house. It was her house. Her son Tanner lived there as well. There was a lady who lived downstairs who was the approximate age of the woman who was in the bedroom.
I got a call from an unknown number, I believe, and it was the police to make sure that I was alive, which was weird. I asked if someone had died, and they said there was somebody
Well, I only knew it could be one person. My youngest son, Tanner.
I'm standing like 5 feet behind my mom, and she just collapsed into a pile on the ground. It was really hard to watch, you know?
I remember just like embracing, like, and then I felt like I kind of held her up at the beginning and just like, no, not Tanner, not Tanner, not Tanner.
I could not make sense of it. That shift from like harmony and happiness to horror was such a dramatic, I couldn't register it.
When they were asking us, did he have any enemies? We were like, he doesn't have an enemy. Trying to even fathom that somehow he was in that house dead, and we didn't even know who could be mad at him.
Then they finally told us there was a female too, and they eventually came out and said she has dark black hair, short hair. We had no idea who that other person was.
So I'm racking my brain. It was just a lot of questions and a lot of fear.
Well, I couldn't imagine who else would be in the house. Who else could it be?
Spokane is located on the eastern part of the state of Washington. Spokane City is the largest metropolitan area really on this side of the state, this side of the Cascade Mountains.
It's pretty, but we have our fair share of serial killers. So we've had lots of those over time. Green River Killer in Seattle. Yates here. And several others. So it's beautiful. And we have serial killers. One thing we do often that I don't necessarily agree with is we tell people, hey, we had this murder and there's nothing for anybody to be concerned about. Somebody was murdered. We don't know who did it. They're walking around the community just like everybody else. Maybe they had a reason to kill this person. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they have a reason to kill you.
The part of the whole experience that was the worst for me was the police officer saying, nonchalantly, mind you, you're gonna have people coming in here like knowing it's a murder scene, like kids, and they're gonna rummage through stuff and be like, oh, cool. You better board the house up and take anything out of there that you want. And here's a card for the cleanup crew, because they don't clean anything in the house. The violence that was there is untouched. It's a Halloween murder show scene in there. So we came back to the crime scene as it was getting dark. There was no power in the house.
I saw it go from my mom's house to the scariest place in the whole world. I remember just like having light kind of flash over certain areas and just being like, oh my gosh. I mean, there was blood everywhere.
I remember standing where Tanner died, looking at the huge pile of blood that was there. And the streaks on the wall. I kept thinking to myself, this is like something from Halloween.
It was dark, it was horrible. It was one of the worst experiences of my whole life.
We went down into that basement, but now it was pitch black. And I heard a sound. It was like a dunk, dunk, doink. And I couldn't tell what it was. And I'm looking around with my flashlight. And I go back to this little nook. And my mother's exercise ball was on the ground, and it was right below where Tanner had been murdered. His blood had saturated all the levels of the floor and were coming down, and they were dripping from the ceiling, and they were hitting that ball like candle wax. It's just surreal. And the whole house smelled burnt, like a campfire. And 4 years after that, I couldn't camp. Because I couldn't smell that smell of a campfire for 4 years. You know?
Tanner was our youngest child. He was just a great son. There's a lot of memories of Tanner.
Road, yes, they're on the road. He's steering right now. No.
We were coming out of my parents' driveway where I was raised out in the country, and he always wanted to get on my lap when we would drive that big Suburban.
Straight ahead now. See the road? You got to just hold it still. Go straight ahead.
And I said, okay, Tanner. He was only like 2.5 or something.
Hands, watch the road. Yeah, watch that road.
The funniest part was how the brothers and sisters were reacting in the back seat.
Drive us on the bridge.
Katie especially, she was just kind of freaking out, you know. But
A little bit of concern there from our girl.
priceless watching that every time.
The first part of figuring out who killed somebody is figuring out who they killed. But we still had no idea who the young girl was. When we searched the bedroom near the body of the female, we found a credit card with a name on it. For a lady who was roughly the same physical makeup as the girl who was deceased. I wanted to know if she was the unidentified victim. I also could tell that whoever committed both crimes had more violent tendencies to the female. The female had been stabbed way more, so I thought they would probably be more closely associated with the female than the male.
So we had a name of somebody, and we started following that up. That's a lead.
Lori wasn't able to give us any information on who the female might be, and she didn't know the person whose card was on the table. She'd never heard of that lady either. In the process of trying to find the lady whose name was on the card, we ended up calling some numbers and spoke to a guy who identified himself as her husband. And the detective just wanted to know where she might be and how they might get a hold of her. And he was less than cooperative with any of that information. He said that he was a long-haul trucker and he was driving across the state and they'd been having some marital issues. He wouldn't confirm any information about her. And then he hung up on the investigators. That was weird. But later, the lady, she actually called us. And she was fine. I guess she heard from her husband we were looking for her. She didn't know anybody at the house. She has no idea how her card ended up there. So we could rule her out as the decedent and consequently her husband out as the suspect. As to who this girl was, just from physical appearance alone, she was quite disfigured, so it's hard to say for sure. She didn't have fingerprints on file, so we couldn't identify her with fingerprints, which is generally how we do it.
We needed to find out who this person was pretty quickly.
It was clear from what we saw that that person was likely going to reoffend.
I did have to question, is this a serial killer? Or is this somebody that I need to be afraid of? Is he still out? Is he going to come after me because I didn't come home? Or come after Lori? Because we were the survivors.
If you have any information on this case, the sheriff's office is asking that you call the tip line. That number, of course, 242-TIPS.
At the time, we're so overwhelmed with losing our son to such a horrific thing that I don't know if we even thought about what the community was thinking. I'm sure the community in that Spokane area was really wanting to know, because it must have been one of the worst murders in a long time.
We received information that Tanner had an ex-girlfriend that had been making statements that she wanted to hurt him.
Tanner had this girl in his life that he was really close with at that time in his life. It was very clear that she had a lot of feelings for him. I know it wasn't reciprocated because he told me himself.
It would have been consistent with what we saw, that if it were a crime of passion, that she could have done it. We knew that they had known each other. We knew she had access to the place, and she'd made threats. So it fit a lot of the different aspects of the case.
If I had to pick one person, just something toxic, like if I can't have you, no one can't, one of those scenarios, she fit the bill. Yes, I completely was able to see that scenario.
We wanted to find Tanner Pell's ex-girlfriend and talk to her and figure out where she was and try to alibi her out or include her as a suspect.
On February 26th, I came home. Tanner that evening had brought a couple of his friends over, and I didn't know any of them, and it was just like Tanner to bring new people in. I think this gentleman had only been in town for a week or so. He was working at the same restaurant that Tanner was working at. Tanner introduced him as Justin.
It was 2 nights before the murders, and he walked in and said, "Mom, I met a guy at work who moved up from Las Vegas, and he said I'd kind of like to help make some friends." And I felt okay about it, because I couldn't imagine, I'd never met one of his friends I just didn't fall in love with, that didn't end up calling me Mama Lori.
And so I did give the police Justin's name very early on. And that's only because I didn't know him well enough, because everyone else Tanner had brought around, we had seen several times.
So he ended up calling us and saying, "Hey, I'm here. You guys want to talk to me?" So they drove right up there to talk to him.
Sarah was just lovely and kind. She was kind of in the background. She wasn't really a part of a lot of the discussions because she didn't know everybody. I also understood her relationship with Justin to be just very casually dating. I didn't have any impression that there was anything serious or anything like that happening.
I was interested in finding her because I wanted to know if that was her, to see if she was the unidentified victim.
well, it could be, it might not be. But at a bare minimum, that person has some questions to answer.
I thought perhaps if that's who that was, that the person who did the murder might be more associated with her than with Tanner.
We found the car in Camelot, which is a little housing development north on the Newport Highway, a couple of miles away. And they found blood on the inside.
So we were comfortable once we saw that. This is definitely who it is. And the medical examiner determined that it was Sarah Clark.
If people could know just the travail that's going on in my house right now, it's just incomprehensible.
She was beautiful. She had a beautiful smile with these huge dimples. We loved her so much.
It was horrible. Felt so sad for Sarah's family.
Sarah's car was found in Camelot, where the Camelot Park is. Justin Crenshaw lived with his sister in that same housing development 5-6 blocks away or so, I would guess. The point is to find out who has the opportunity, what does the evidence tell you, where does it lead you, and go that way.
At that point, we were able to rule out Tanner Pell's ex-girlfriend because she had nothing to do with it. There was no evidence that pointed to her there, which left us with Justin Crenshaw.
So I sent a couple of detectives up to talk to him. They made contact with Justin, and then the detectives talked to the sister.
She was concerned because he didn't seem very concerned at all about what might have happened at the house. Well, it just seemed odd to her. And she knew he had violent tendencies, and she knew he'd been in trouble with the police before. She was concerned that he might have had something to do with it.
Tanner had said, I know he's been in some kind of trouble before, but, he was just a kid that looked like Tanner. You just think, might not be a great kid, but when I went to sleep, I'll never forget it. I had a bad feeling, no doubt about it.
I'm racking my brain trying to figure out, should there have been a red flag? Is there something that I missed? I definitely went back to that evening and thought about all the different conversations and all the different dynamics and things that I maybe blew off that I should have given more thought to. Like when Justin was telling me about his gunshot wound, or that he was not going to take any of his organs with him when he died. Just sort of those weird things.
Running his history, you could see that he'd been arrested in Las Vegas. He had stabbed a guy or cut a guy or something when he was younger. So we contacted Las Vegas. As it turns out, he had prints on file, and they in fact did fax a set of prints up to us.
But they did not compare to the one we had on the back door. We knew he had a pair of black shoes. Justin's family all described that he was wearing black shoes when he left. He had a pair of black Nikes. But he said, I don't have any black Nikes. And also, while they were talking to Justin, they saw a small injury here, a cut on the back of the finger, and a cut on the back of the palm here. Almost every brutal, violent stabbing that I've investigated, that knife becomes covered in blood, and blood is very viscous and very slippery. So it isn't unusual for them as they stab to start to slip off the knife and cut themselves.
The problem was his fingerprints weren't quite clear enough on the facts to make a direct comparison with. So then we thought, okay, we need to get the prints from him. So we decided that we would detain him and take him downtown, get a set of prints, do a search warrant for his DNA, his clothes, fingernail clippings, photographs, all of that stuff. And then we would have a good fingerprint to compare to the print on the inside of the door. So that's what we did. While we were waiting, he needed to go to the bathroom. And then he washed his hands like his life depended on it twice. Which I don't mind a guy, I think it's appropriate to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, but that was really serious. Like, he was washing his hands like he was going into surgery. Once we got the processing done, it was a matter of just waiting for the results.
We thought that Crenshaw was the killer, but he might not have been. And if he wasn't, that person was likely going to reoffend.
We got the results back from the forensic unit supervisor, and she said that bloody fingerprint is Justin's left little finger. Yeah, there it is. That's what I'm looking for.
If I told him, you're under arrest for the first-degree murder of Tanner Pell and Sarah Clark, I found it powerful to use their names. He was the scariest guy I've ever been in a room with, and I've known lots of psychopaths. He was matter of fact, and I had seen what he had done, so it was a relief to be able to tell him he was under arrest.
The truth is, though, that when we got the fingerprint match, what we got was enough to arrest him for it. That's when the work starts. The deputy found a knife out on the road, maybe a mile away. It was right between where the murders occurred and where he ended up in Camelot. And it had blood on it, and it was believed to actually be the murder weapon, which was pretty remarkable.
Which turned out to be Tanner's favorite chef knife.
We also sent a couple guys up to go through his aunt's house, looking for where the black Nike shoes were, which we found.
He said, I don't have any black Nikes, because it turns out they were covered in blood.
That is pretty much the gotcha moment.
Good evening. He's been in Spokane for just 2 weeks.
But tonight, Justin Crenshaw is in jail accused of killing 2 people in North Spokane.
Both victims had apparently been killed with a cutting instrument.
Justin Crenshaw had little to no response as the judge read the graphic details of the accusations against him.
The judge gave Crenshaw 4 chances to speak. He declined.
Well, thank you. I don't want to take anything away from any of the families.
While we don't know exactly what happened, it appears that Justin Crenshaw was alone in the bedroom with Sarah Clark, and some argument broke out in there. Justin accessed Tanner's favorite chef knife and began stabbing Sarah there. Tanner, who was most likely playing guitar, heard the commotion and came to the bedroom to assist, at which point he was attacked by Justin Crenshaw, who stabbed him several times, killing him right there. And then he went back to finish killing Sarah Clark. And then spent lots of time in the house, putting the pictures down, taking items that he found in the house, stabbing their bodies with it. Doing things that made no sense except just to be brutal and just to enjoy himself simply for gratification. And trying to burn the house down because he knew there was lots of evidence that pointed to him there. When I talked to him about what I had seen him do, he was as casual as talking about football. He'd basically cut the head off his girlfriend and killed his best friend and then stuck stuff in him for no reason other than to be cruel, and didn't give a shit. He will kill you and not even care.
Part of me was absolutely shocked when I learned it was him, because he didn't give off killer vibes, I guess. But one of the things that the police told me very quickly is that because Justin was so violent and so evil, and there just wasn't a reason for what he did that they could establish, that it was very good that I didn't go home that night, because I very likely would have been killed as well.
We didn't see him officially until the trial. Being in that courtroom with him and you're so close, I hated seeing him. He was smirking a lot, like often those kind of people do. And I just kept looking at his hands on the stand, and I just kept thinking, those hands were here. I just couldn't stop looking at him. And I just think, man, those hands took that life away. As we were leaving one day and we had to walk down the same court hallway as Crenshaw,
he like darted towards me and got like this close to my face and did like the wink wink and to my face. He goes like, they like took him to the ground. Mind you, I was like 5 months pregnant with my son, so I couldn't do anything the trial was awful. And I ended up running into the men's bathroom and just puking.
Justin Crenshaw was convicted of first-degree premeditated aggravated murder of Sarah Clark and Tanner Pell. And his only available sentence, since we don't really use the death penalty here in Washington anymore, is life without the possibility of parole. So he's incarcerated until he dies.
A year after it happened, I moved back to my house and nobody wanted me to, but I wanted to be close to him. I want him to be here. I want to talk to him every day. Everybody has their way of remembering, and I think how they want him to be remembered is, and me too, is the only way he can be is beautiful.
Mom, I love you so much. Have a wonderful day.